The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello, and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. Lawyers can be social engineers for good or for evil. That's one of the beliefs that's guided the work of Seattle attorney Lowell Halverson. In 1990, Halverson became the 101st president of the Washington State Bar Association. He's the first Native American to have that job in the organization's history. Halverson got his law degree from the University of Washington in 1968, and in the more than 20 years since then has become well known for his work and for his sometimes irreverent philosophy concerning the practice of law. Welcome to Upon Reflection.
Thank you.
Can you think back and remember what it was that made you say, I want to be a lawyer?
Well, I think I'd probably have to reflect on my early childhood then. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I'm not sure I understand why, reflecting back or even now, but yeah, I've always wanted to be a lawyer.
How did you see yourself when you thought, I want to be a lawyer? What was the role you were playing?
Well, I wasn't in a baseball uniform. That's what my grandfather wanted me to be. But I saw myself as a social activist, a person who was interested in justice, interested in getting things done. And law seemed to me a very logical way to get to those kinds of life activities.
And when you got to law school, what was it like in reality?
Horrible. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone.
That's what everyone says. Why so horrible?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be horrible if you had a logical mind. And a lot of people do. I don't have to be blessed with one. I'm more intuitive, I think. So you get all that intuition kind of squeezed out of you, and it's kind of like going through a pipeline. The other end is not necessarily recognizable, and I was barely recognizable, in my opinion, at least when I got out of law school, though I was a good thinker, I think.
One of the things I've read that you said about going to law school, you talked about it as almost a samurai experience. You said that going to law school was a killer of the imagination.
Well, of the kind of imagination that I like to think I'm utilizing now, yes. But no, there was lots of opportunity for the kind of imagination that's oriented toward conflict, because every case that we studied, and it was the case method of study, presented conflict. Somebody was always getting run over by somebody else, or being injured by somebody else, or taking something away from somebody else, and they were trying to get it back. And that's what we were doing, was spotting those issues, learning how to resolve the conflicts.
You went to law school in the 1960s. That was a time of great turbulence, a time of great social change. Did that affect how you came to look at the law? Well,
I just missed the years of the early 70s at the law school here at the University of Washington, which was the time of greatest social activism on this campus, at least in my humble opinion. But I did bring with me some similar activist viewpoints from my earlier days at Harvard, where I'd been in Cambridge in the early 60s, and been on a freedom bus and seen a lot of that sort of activity. The social activism for our law school here at the university, I'd say, was past my era there, though I was active in the Bar Association at the same time that a lot was going on here.
When you use the phrase social activism, what does that mean?
Well, in the narrowest sense, your version of justice. And of course, everybody can honestly disagree about what justice is, but in the particular context in which I was growing up, it was trying to make sure that more people had access to the court system, more people had access to their legal entitlements, and that certain kinds of emerging rights were being recognized. Women's rights, for example. The major legislation in that area came out in 1968, about the time I graduated from law school. And really the filter down process didn't reach me till probably 1970, 71, when I became active in a lot of class action discrimination lawsuits against the big boys.
How in other ways did your activism come to the fore? I know you've won a number of awards for pro bono work, for service to the community.
Well, I like to think that the service that I provided within the legal profession was really organizing others to provide the service to the community. There were a number of lawyers who did tremendous good works for our community during that era, and currently too. In fact, I'm rather proud to say that there are probably 5,000 lawyers in this state who have contributed to what we call pro bono publico, for the good of the public, in the last year. So yes, there's me acting more like a catalyst for others who are actually putting out the work. Though I will say that there was one project I'm rather proud of, and that's the interest on trust account rule. That was one which I tried to get started years ago when I was active in bar politics and fell miserably on my face. So I went out on my own privately after not being able to get the organized bar to respond and just filed a petition with the Supreme Court. And it was at a happy confluence of times when the court seemed to be interested in the petition, and so after a couple of years I granted it.
Now what that decision meant was that the interest that accrues to the money, lawyers put their clients' money in this trust account, interest accrues, and that interest goes to give people who might not normally have access to the law legal representation. What happened to that money before that decision?
Banks kept it. Basically, there was no interest being paid on these special kind of lawyer trust accounts. The client would bring in, let's say, $500. It would be in the lawyer's trust account for about 3 days before it was expended for some purpose, and there was no interest paid on that account. I used to go down to my bank and say, well, gee, what happens to this interest? And the banker would say, well, there is no interest because these are funds held in trust. So I said, well, what about the compensating balance then? Doesn't that belong to somebody? And they said no. So I said, well, if it doesn't belong to anybody, let's ask if somebody else can use it instead of just the banks. We have a lot of people that have good uses for that money, and we put it to good use. $13 million so far.
After that decision, I read that one of your colleagues, fairly inebriated at the time, but nonetheless was very, very angry with you about that, called you a robber. Why?
Well, I think this was at the early stage of the proceeding. As I say, I was not very successful with the organized bar. This idea did not go over with a great deal of enthusiasm. And this was a member of the Board of Governors from another era and another area. And this person simply felt that this money belonged to the banks, or if not to the banks, then at least to the clients. And if not to the clients, then perhaps to the lawyers, but certainly not to the poor people in the state.
You mentioned your lack of success in bar politics some years ago. Clearly you've gotten better at that.
Apparently so.
And how does your philosophy fit with being the head of an organization that represents some 17,000 lawyers?
Well, depending on who's watching this, because I have to play now to several different political groups within my organization, I would say that I'm a little bit in advance of most of them, though some may say I'm now slipping closer into the middle of the herd. I've always been interested in the bar's powerful effect on being able to influence, for the good, various programs within our community. And I think the Bar Association is coming to recognize that it has a coextensive responsibility to the people that it serves, not just the narrow constituency of lawyers, but also to the greater constituency, the public. And so over the years, I think there's been a trend, and I'm part of that trend, I believe, to have the bar reach out and do its fair share giving back to the public that which the public gives to us in the form of fees and services.
So what is your job exactly as the president of the Bar Association?
Well, it turns out it's more than merely a figurehead. There are some actual credible things I can do, and so I've taken advantage of it and trying to get some of them done. The bar president, besides being kind of the titular head, the person who shows up at the rubber chicken banquets, is also the person who can have some small influence on policy of the bar. Certainly the credibility of the bar. For example, I've been doing my best to reach out to the community. I gave a talk to the Baha'i community about 2 weeks ago and urged them to consider us for one of their awards one of these years, because we do good works. And at the time I was hoping to present awards to leaders in the Baha'i community who've done good works. I can and do deal with members of our state Supreme Court. I deal with our bar executives all the time, and occasionally I get the opportunity to be with people like yourself.
One of the things that's going to happen in the next 10 years or so is that the membership of the Bar Association, it means the number of practicing attorneys in Washington State, may as much as double by the year 2000. What kind of impact is that going to have on all of us?
Well, now's the time for a good lawyer joke, but I won't tell it.
Now, why not? I think you should.
Well, I do think that we had the same experience when I first got elected to the Board of Governors 10 years ago. That's the governing body of the Bar Association. Our membership at that time doubled. For some reason, although without the influence of LA law, there were the Perry Mason types who decided they wanted to go to law school. Or persons perhaps like myself who realized that law school is where the action is if you are a social activist. The bar at that time was extremely upset. They were concerned about bar admissions and law school admissions, and they were saying, my gosh, we should maybe consider a quota system. And of course, getting a quota system among lawyers is like trying to play cards in free fall parachuting. There's no way we can ever get ourselves organized on any kind of issue such as that, and we would never have done so anyhow. So the market finds its own level, like water. Lawyers diffuse throughout the community, and some of them become lawyers, and some of them become CEOs of corporations, and some of them just go broke. But it's pretty much a laissez-faire world out there in our profession. I will say that there seems to be more pressure on for the billable hours, and that is of some concern to me, because when we become less of a profession and more of a business, then we have more of a business kind of ethic and attitude about how we conduct our business of law, and that concerns me.
I have to ask you, Bill Blowers. Did you say Bill Blowers?
I hope not. No, I'm not sure. No, I didn't.
Oh, you said something about that there's more interest in becoming a...
Well, in the business of law, we can end up becoming more like Rambo types, and that is a concern to me.
I see.
Those lawyers who kind of foment conflict rather than trying to find solutions, mediated solutions that work for people.
And again, thinking of twice as many of these people practicing their craft, does that mean that we're likely to become a more contentious society?
I hope not. The contentiousness is not found within the seeds of the lawyers themselves. I think it's probably within our society itself. We have some rather unusual expectations as contrasted with other cultures about how we look at deals, for example. Two Japanese businessmen in Japan would think nothing of reforming a contract that became impossible to perform because the timber products burned down, or the forest burned down and they could no longer deliver the forest. In this country, if you didn't cross your T and dot your I correctly, you're going to get sued. And there's always a lawyer out there that's going to help you do that. But it's a community expectation, I think. It's not a lawyer expectation.
So it's something, it feeds each other. We all have a part to play in this.
I'm afraid so, a rather vicious circle.
Well then, how do you think your philosophy of negotiation, mediation, the kind of philosophy you practice in family law and in divorce counseling, is that heresy? I mean, the War of the Roses versus let's be rational and think this all out.
Well, I'm used to heresy, so it's a comfortable word in my lexicon. And yes, it is heresy perhaps currently, but I think within 10 years, more and more lawyers are going to be drifting or dragged toward the concept of alternative forms of resolving disputes besides the litigation process.
Why?
Well, I don't think the public's going to put up with it, and I don't think a lot of lawyers are going to put up with it either. We have a limited number of courtrooms, we have limited resources, we have people who believe that conflict can be resolved in a fashion other than direct confrontation and the polarizing experience of a courtroom. And courtroom justice is just too expensive for most people. Who has access to it these days?
So it's sort of the positive way to look at the fact that there's going to be a lot more lawyers. That may actually force us away from contentiousness, away from conflict.
In the old days, we were called attorneys and counselors. And I think we have forgotten, many of us, to wear a counselor hat. The counselor hat is basically one that says there has to be a better solution than litigation for the process that you happen to be in, client. Now let us look for alternative ways of resolving this particular conflict short of litigation. That's good counseling.
In addition to your work as a lawyer, you are also an artist, and we want to share a little bit of Lowell Halverson's artwork with you. You've just seen some of the artwork collected by Lowell Halverson and some of the artwork done by Lowell Halverson. The paintings were your works. And what part of you does being an artist satisfy that being a lawyer doesn't?
Well, obviously the creative side. A lot of people say lawyering is not a creative enterprise, and for some of us it is not particularly creative. This is a way, for me personally, of expressing a need to create ideas, paintings, whatever, that makes me feel good inside.
The artwork that you've collected and the artwork that you do reflects your background. You're a Tlingit Indian, a member of the Eagle clan. So there's a real integration between that part of your life and this part of your work.
I like to think so. I like to think that the work that I do is in the public area is a giving back to the public those very valuable tools that have been given to me. Just to get to go to college and to get to go on to law school is kind of a big deal within my family background, and I have a real high impetus to return some of that back to the community. And the potlatch concept is similar to that too. Although some people call potlatches just another form of economic warfare, they are a returning of the favor, and they're a recognition that we hold things in trust temporarily, and then we pass them on to others.
Those lives, the creative life, your cultural background, so well woven in your artwork. What about in the practice of law? Do the cultural values and the values of your profession fit as nicely, as easily?
That's more problematical, of course. Indians are not exactly what you call the image of tranquility and a halcyon couples along the bay and a beautiful day and quiet rhythms and so on. There was conflict in the Aboriginal societies as well. And so I guess I can reconcile the conflict I deal with every day. But on the artistic side, I've done my best to although recognizing conflict, the conflict of litigation, also recognize that there are solutions. In fact, I took a couple of I-beams and built some kind of what I'd call minimalist type totems in front of my office. And one of them I broke purposely into 3 parts. Then I called it Broken Promises, which I think is emblematic both of the kind of work I do in the area of divorce, the broken promises of the economic community that's going to last forever. And then I built another rather wholesome sort of 30-foot sculpture which rises to the sky and is a symbol to me of the healing process. Just as those masks that we saw a few minutes ago, those shamans' masks are all tied up with the concept of healing, of making things better, of making things well.
Do you feel a particular responsibility as a Native American to activism within your own community?
Well, of course, and I like to think I have done so. I'm also active in the Tlingit Haida tribal community up in southeastern Alaska, though geographically speaking, I'm somewhat handicapped by what I can do there. I'm also tied into the art of the tribe and trying to translate some of the traditional art, the ovid eye, the concentric circles, the bold colors, trying to translate those into kind of a modern, if I were a modern Aborigine, how would I look at art forms and how would I paint them? That's sort of interesting to me. And with my daughter and a professional photographer, we're lining up a show, for example, up at the See Alaska building in Juneau in March, which is to photograph, in last May we photographed a lot of good artists that are showing their works up in southeastern Alaska who relatively unrecognized down here. We're trying to make them recognized. I want to help bring these people out.
When I asked you that question, you answered by saying, of course. Of course you feel a responsibility. But that's not always true. I mean, women attorneys don't necessarily feel a special responsibility for women, or it's something particular to you.
Oh, I think that most people who are drawn to the legal profession are built to serve. There are very few that I've encountered personally who are simply money machines. If you peel off a lawyer, you're going to find a next-door neighbor. Once you get past the patina, you'll see somebody who is serving in some capacity in their community. Most lawyers are other directed toward people and toward service.
We've talked about the law and we've talked about art, but I think a conversation with you would be incomplete if we didn't talk at least a bit about a personality test that you consider to be very important, and it is a way you have of analyzing the world.
Well, thank you. I am a Myers-Briggs junkie, and I'm willing to admit it.
The Myers-Briggs Test is?
The Myers-Briggs Test is based on Jungian psychology. It's designed to help you understand who you are and who those persons who are closest to you are. It's premised on the assumption you really can't change who you are, and so you better find out more about yourself so you get kind of centered. And I took the test myself. That's kind of when I got off into this sort of artistic pathway. And since then I've given it to my family, my friends, just about anybody. I'd love to give it to you when we're done with the show. I give it to every client, and for me it's a very quick way of getting a read on the temperament of that person. I'm trying to write a book on negotiating techniques, and I need to find out very quickly how that client is negotiating, because the rules are basically that people are going to end up negotiating their own divorces, not the lawyers. It's the people themselves that inevitably do the final negotiations. So I got to know how my client is in terms of negotiating style, and I can detect that through this Myers-Briggs type test.
Has it ever failed you?
Oh, sure. I have gotten some misreadings, but usually I think it's because the person who took the test is somewhat holding back from answering the questions. And they're very benign questions. Nobody flunks the test.
Oh, you have to be honest when you answer.
You better be honest when you answer. That's right.
Now, when your colleagues hear about this personality test that you have all your clients, I mean, is that one of the things that makes them kind of raise an eyebrow? It's sort of one step away from reading tea leaves or astrology.
You bet. I'm a flake, but I'm also the Washington State Bar president, so somehow there's a little bit of credibility with that. And I have actually lectured in continuing legal education classes to lawyers utilizing the test. And I have given the test to some of the best-known lawyers in the state. They know who they are.
What do you want to have accomplished by the time your term as bar president is over?
Well, I would like to see in place a well-developed mechanism for resolving disputes among citizens of this state short of litigation. I would like to see mediation centers, for example, accessible to every citizen of the state in every county in the state, including Wahkiakum and up in Omak. I'd like to be able to say to people, you can go to some place besides the courtroom to get a remedy here, and just walk over to your local YMCA and they have a mediation center in there. That would be ideal. I don't think it's going to be totally achievable, but we're on the way. I've got that process working. I would like to see every lawyer in the state committed to a pro bono program. We're on the way there too. Realistically, I can probably expect to get maybe 6,000 lawyers to give significant pro bono community service in the coming year. Those are two objectives. I also like to be able to balance the budget for the Bar Association, which I think we'll be able to do.
And your odds for accomplishing all of those by the time your term is over?
By the time my term is over, my odds are 0, but I intend to stay committed. And within a year or so after I get off the Board of Governors, I fully expect to have all these programs implemented and working.
Do you feel you've been, your style has been tempered at all by being the head of the Bar Association? Have you had to watch your step a little bit more?
Well, I went to an American Bar Association leadership conference in which they told me to keep my mouth shut. And so I guess in that sense, no. My style has not been tempered. Even on issues that are controversial, where I get somebody that might call me from a newspaper which I know is not a friendly newspaper to the profession, I do not follow the rules. I will sit down and I'll talk to that person for as much as a half hour and background as much as I can.
Lowell Halverson, I know that 3 of your goals are to write a bestseller, to produce an outstanding sculpture, and to catch a really big fish, in addition to continue your practice of law, and I wish you the best in all of those.
Thank you very much.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.